share his knowledge and wisdom about the advertising industry. So without further ado, hello, Mr. Shukri, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Hello, thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone.
Okay, so let's jump right into the questions. So, Mr. Shukri, my first question to you would be, what could you tell us about the current advertising and branding industry, especially with remote working and COVID and new media, like how it's changing? What could you tell us about the industry itself?
That's a very interesting question because most of us don't even know what's happening, basically. Okay. Okay, to take back in terms of during my days, they were entirely different. Okay, because I spent 3 different decades of the industry and the evolution and the shift and everything changes at the beginning of the new millennium when digitalization steps in, you see. And from there on, with the growing of social media, that is a real disruption within the industry. The industry was struggling, trying to adapt and to change because the conventional way of communicating, conventional way of reaching the audience have to change because the audience are communicating with each other instead of you listen to me. In the previous decades, you see, advertising was a one-way communication. Now it's an interactive, and in a sense that they can comment, they can give feedback, and it's immediate. Okay, so that has changed the entire landscape of the industry. And however, the more important part is basically in the context of, you mentioned context of branding. Advertising is just a part of branding, which is the branding communication. Is it? That's how it's a paid branding communication, basically, as far as our industry is concerned. So branding as a whole has got a whole new perspective in terms of how it plays in the context of marketing, you know. The promotion part of it, the pricing part of it, the product side of it. So advertising is just a part of to communicate what the brand stands for. The more important part is to be able to understand what the brand stands for and how do we communicate it. Because with the new era of digitalization, I'm always get stuck in my tongue with that word. Things have changed. Things of how brands communicate, things of how brand interact with the customers. Those are key. Those are the perspective which industry have to be able to catch up. You know, because things change very fast. Has to catch up to be able to communicate and maintain that relationship, maintain that relevance to resonate with the consumers, so that you be part of that community, to be able to be part of that target audience, for effectiveness in terms of maintaining the brand presence, basically. Yeah, it has a lot of change.
Right. So with this change, and you say that branding is most important. So whenever you get a client, right, or a project, as a leader, you're responsible to understand that client and their brief and to understand their brand and to emphasize it. So how would you go through that process? How would you analyze their brief, and what are the processes you need to go through to produce efficient and good quality of work?
Okay, a very interesting perspective. It was a good question because I put it into context. Number one, let me talk about my multinational clients. Okay,
right.
You mentioned the brand. I've had the opportunity to work on Levi's for 18 years, on Coca-Cola for 10 years, on Citibank, and all those international brands. Right, international brand, they came from the States or from Europe or whatever. They already have a standard strategy of, not so much strategy, of the brand guidelines or what the brand stands for. All we need to do is adapt that brand strategy into our market. How do you localize Coca-Cola? How do you localize a brand like Levi's? A brand values like Levi's is like genuine, it's like American. How do you Americanize the brand in Malaysia, basically? So they already have a guidelines in terms of what the brand stands for. So anywhere in the world, if you go, even like Nike, for example, had opportunity to work on as well. Anywhere in the world, the Nike ad looks the same, but it was produced by different people. I'm saying, so is that. So our role is to be able to understand the brand of how it should be globally as a brand values or the brand identity, and how do we communicate that identity within the context of our society without being intrusive, without being, sensitive, but has to be sensitive with the local, and yet maintaining that global essence of what the brand stands for. So in a sense, it is quite easy, but not so, because, how do you put a Western brand into the local context and that not losing that global image and getting a buy-in from you? But, but not naturally, because in general, our youngsters are very much exposed to the West, especially now. Before we have to wait for 6 months to get the MTV, for example. Now MTV is passé. You get your latest music faster than a snap and a blink of an eye.
Right.
Basically that. So I mean, people catch up with what's happening overseas faster than we were. Because when I was working with my client like Levi's, we were ahead in terms of trend because we caught up with Europe and the US very much earlier than everybody else within this market. So it's easier to be a leader in that context. But because of that information, we can become a leader, then we can lead as a brand, making other brand as a follower, basically. As far as local brands are concerned, most of the brands that I work with during my advertising days and even as a consultant now is that context of your first question when I say about branding as part of marketing has not been fully embraced just yet, because each brand will have to have the idea, the central idea, or people call it the positioning, for example. The positioning, as an example, positioning of a Nike. What is Nike? Nike is just a sports shoes. So is Adidas, so is Reebok, so everybody else, Under Armour, whatever. You bring in all the brands, they're all the same shoes. You take out the stripes, the 3 stripes, you put the swoosh, it becomes another brand.
Yeah.
But what provide the point of difference between the 3 stripes and the swoosh is in the consumer's mind. That's what we call branding. It's not so much in the product anymore, because products are the same. You put like Mercedes and BMW, they're all German technology. They all price the same thing, But the image, Coke and Coca-Cola and Coca-Cola and Pepsi, what's the difference? One is red and one is blue. It's as simple as that. Because inside there, if I put you in a neutral glass, you can't even tell. But the point is, each one of them, within the context of a consumer, in the mind of a consumer, it means something. Why I choose Adidas out of Nike? Because the affinity of Adidas with me is stronger than the other brand, basically. So that's the role of the brand. That's what is missing in a lot of the local brands. So in the context of local brand, we have to take 2 steps back. Find a strategy for the brand before we can start communicating what they stand for. Because we always fall into a trap of being a follower rather than a leader because of the competition. For example, the competition can do this. I also can do that. And then another competition did something else. I also can do that. At the end of the day, you want to claim that you are a lot of things. You know what's the problem is going to be? the consumer don't remember because there's too many things that you are trying to be. You have to
Right.
have one. You have to have one identity, basically. So that is the success of the multinational brands. Coca-Cola has been around for 130 years. The logo has not changed. The CEOs have changed by the hundreds, but the brand hasn't changed. What the brand means hasn't changed, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Back to Nike, for example. They are all sports shoes. But what is the brand positioning of Nike? It's unbridled pursuit of passion. If I'm passionate enough, I'll go for it. That's why the tagline is what?
Just do it.
Exactly.
Mm.
So whenever you want to do something, make sure you do it better. You
Right.
give yourself more, basically. Just do it to a person like me who's over 60 years old. If I can walk in my garden, in my park, nearby park, 2 kilometers a day, and tomorrow I
Mm-hmm.
work 2.5 kilometers, that's my just do it. But for a person like Usain Bolt, it's about breaking records. It's not about winning because he can win. But whether he can break his record, that is his just do it. So that's the kind of imageries, that's the kind of feeling. It's not about the shoes, it's about the
Mm-hmm.
consumer. I'm saying that. So
Right.
once you understand that, then easy for you to brief, then easy for you to choose what team to work on, whatever. Okay, but back to your question, how do I select? In the advertising agency, we are very regimented. This is the creative team. This is the creative team is divided by the client. You work on Coca-Cola, you work on Levi's, you work on Citibank, you work on that. So you got no choice. But
Right.
choice that I have as a CEO is to choose who I want to work with, basically. Okay, and because you have to have people. People has got lots of talent. For example, a creative person. Some creative are good with fashion. So Levi's, I will give to that person, for example. And some person is
Right.
good with sports because
Mm-hmm.
everyone has got their specialized talent. So that's how you choose, basically. So now, as a consultant, I work with independent. The what do you call it? Industry, anything. So I can choose whoever, my previous staff or whatever, who's talented enough to be able to, as long as I have the budget. If I can
Right.
pay them, I'll choose them. If I not, I'll find somebody cheaper. At least I give opportunities to people to be able to work. So in that context, you have to take a step back in terms of understanding the brand. Because if you give to a designer, and then designer will struggle. Know the fundamentals of design, but they have to understand the fundamentals of the brand to be able to marry it with the design. For example, if they know and they say, about I need to do a new, for example, a new campaign for a sports brand, for Adidas, for example, or Nike, and then you give the designer, he has to understand what Nike stands for.
Mm-hmm.
If not, he'll come up with something very scientific. Does it mean that Nike is scientific, for example?
No.
It's like Star Wars style? It doesn't fit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So is that. The most important thing is, for all to understand the brand perspective. That is
Right.
very important, those things. Is
So
that
you've
clear now?
worked with, yeah, yeah, definitely. But you've worked with, again, as you say, like these multinational companies, Levi's, Coca-Cola, and all of them. And then I'm guessing you've also worked with local Malaysian brands.
Yeah.
Which one is it easier to advertise or easier to understand, if I'm phrasing it correctly? Like, which one is it easier to build up or brand? Because the multinational companies already have,
Yes.
uh
As a footing. I mean,
yeah, it has,
I understand where you're
yeah.
coming from. It's always easier to bring up the foreign brands because they're
Mm-hmm.
famous. Okay, because I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to work with the famous brands. There are also foreign brands which are not famous, which we
Right.
struggle. You see,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I work with Nestle as well. Nestle has
Mm-hmm.
got a lot of brands. Okay, the
Yes.
Milo, the Nescafe, the Maggi, and the Maggi has got plenty of sub brands. People don't know that there are a lot of flops in Maggi brands that I work with. But again, because that's the context of the business, they can introduce something. If something doesn't work, throw it away. That's why Nestle doesn't get involved in the brand relationship. Only some sub Maggi brands. So we can buy other Maggi, for example, because this Maggi doesn't work with the consumer, throw it away, introduce something else, basically. So in that context, you know, sorry, I lost my thought. I was rambling. Got a detour there. Your point just now.
Is it easier to
Yeah, easier.
establish
Yeah, yeah,
multinational
yeah,
brands
yeah,
or
yeah.
build up new brands?
Always easier to establish multinational brand
Multinational
because of
brands.
familiarity. Branding,
Right.
advertising is to create that familiarity. To consumer to be familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Local brands, yes, with the local context, but sustainability is important. Introduction is easy. I've introduced local brands once, when they have a lot of money to advertise, whatever, they capture the sales very easily. But to
Mm-hmm.
sustain that sales is very difficult because,
Right.
it becomes, when something is new, it is novelty. And then for you to be able to keep along with that, that's what the local brand need to understand. Spending on branding is a constant thing because
Right.
consumers need to be reminded. They cannot forget about you. Brands like Coca-Cola survive on advertising because during my days, I mean, even though I'm giving examples of the 20 years ago, 10 years ago, the fundamentals are the same. Remember that, okay? Remember that. Because I give
Mm-hmm.
this talk somewhere in Singapore. One student, you saw that 15 years ago. Uncle said, but your example is 4, 5 years ago. I mean, if I give you an example right now, I mean, I'm doing your work for you. Yeah, I'm giving a basis for you to think rather than
Mm-hmm.
giving you the answers. What I'm giving you is that these are the fundamentals that I've learned, fundamentals that I've been trained. They send me all over the world to be able to train with how Coca-Cola think, how Levi's think, and how all these global brands think, to be able for us to adapt into our market or understand the global market to be able to take the brand forward. You know, basically
Right.
that. Because what Nike stands for hasn't changed for the last 40 years. What Coca-Cola stands for hasn't changed for the last 130 years. Maybe during the first 20 years, they're slightly different. When it comes to the modern era, it has been sustained. But how we communicate change. How I communicate in 1997 for Coca-Cola to guys like you, the 18-year-old to the 20-year-olds, I delivered the same message, but in a different way. Because teenagers then were different than
Right.
whatever you are right now, 10 years ago. So the point is, if we target to our mindset, not so much to the demographics, to the 18 or 20-year-old, we target to the mindset. The mindset of what does an 18-year-old go for or 20-year-old go for. They like to try new things. During our days in the 90s, it was like, oh, MTV is the thing because it's so difficult to get MTV, basically. And then suddenly it
Right.
came to Malaysian TV. Oh, that's the craziest thing that happened to this world. There's something new.
Mm-hmm.
They can't. Now, nothing. So now it's like, how do we break into the monotony of you staring at this uh, device every day? That's
Right.
your task, basically. That's your task. So it's not so much of which brand is easier, it's how you connect,
Right.
basically. So yeah.
So speaking of connection, obviously the brands and the clients, they have a particular image they would like to represent their brand, right? Like
Yeah.
what they
Yeah.
would like to advertise. And maybe the advertising firms, they have a different idea or a particular image. So how do the brands and the firm, like how does it all mesh together? How do you, if there's confusion, how do you come to a solid solution, like the brand and the firm, advertising firm?
Ideas again, okay, yeah, ideas again. I understand where you're coming from, especially during those days where advertising was like driving a lot of brands. All the clients, especially in the 90s, clients spend millions and millions of dollars. That's the heydays of the advertising in Malaysia, basically.
Right.
I was lucky to be part of it because clients were spending millions and millions of dollars, everything through communication. So we were competing with each other, agency wise, whatever. But we're still friends. I was leading the Coca-Cola team, and then suddenly the director of marketing of Pepsi called me. Hey, stop spending. Why are you spending so much? I cannot compete because he was my ex-client from another brand, basically. So those were the days in terms of advertising is simple. It's conventional. Spend money, you can hear. The consumer will like you. The consumer will sustain with you. But in terms of okay, there's always wherever I detour, I always lost my way. Sorry about that. It's too early in the morning.
So basically, it was, yeah. Please go on.
No.
It was just basically like what the client wants versus what the firm wants. It's the middle ground. How do you reach the middle ground?
Middle ground, it's very difficult to come to that situation because, like I said, based on the previous question, my answers were like the brand will always stick to what they stand for. Okay,
right, yes.
That will be the perimeter of what the client will decide, how the client will decide, how the job is going to get approved. If it is outside of that perimeter, even though it's so brilliant, even though it's so creative, no, it's not for us. Understand? So advertising, the main lesson that all the creative team in the advertising industry learn is that creativity is not everything. Brand is. Because when they come up with something creative, I think this is brilliant. I think this ad is brilliant, but that's not what the brand stands for. It may be good for other brands. You sell it to other brands, but not for this one, basically. So at the end of the day, in the early days, that's what happened. Okay? Because the brand perimeter, what the brand stands for, the positioning wasn't rigid enough. Okay, so we go for guts. I think that's great. Let's go for it. It works. Okay, and then the 90s came, the era of computerization, where everything is set in the with research and the data can support. This is what the brand stands for. This is what the consumer percentage, whatever analytics they can put in at those era. So we stick to what the brand stands for. It's very difficult. It's somehow okay. The danger, the question that you pose after when a pitch, you will lose the pitch immediately, even though you're creative, because it doesn't fit with the brand. Unless the brand hasn't got any positioning, especially the local brands. They go for, I think it's brilliant. And then when they launch, and then the brand go haywire. And then they change agency. Then the agency presented something other creative in a different direction. So the consumer confused. What do you stand for? Then consumer will find something with familiarity. Basically, when you use something, it's about familiarity. Because you wake up early in the morning, what do you look for? This one. So this one is also, why do you decide, other than money? Okay, when you have the money, why do you decide whether you want to have a Samsung, you want to have an iPhone, or an Oppo, for example? It's familiarity. And then you go to the toilet, you pick up a toothbrush, that's also a brand. You pick up a toothpaste, that's also a brand. Your shampoo, your soap, those are branded without realizing it. we are all surrounded by brands. We are all so branded. Don't
Right.
come and tell me there are some friends say, hey, I'm not a branded person. Yeah, right. if you
We're
don't
all
choose brand,
branded
it's also,
people, right?
you're all branded people.
All right.
Because it's about familiarity. It's about familiarity, basically. So that's what makes a brand and a business successful.
Mm-hmm.
Because you stay true to what you stand for. You change based on time. You don't change who you are, but you change in terms of how you communicate who you are
Right.
in those days. I worked Levi's for 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
My first year, my 18-year-old has become 30 something already after the 18 years. So I don't talk to them anymore. I keep talking to the 18-year-olds, basically.
Right.
You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So yeah.
So, as I mentioned before, right, many of us in this class are just freshly going to graduate this year, hopefully,
Yeah.
and intern. So, do you have any advice you would like to share with us for the fresh graduates or what recruiters are looking for?
If you're listening to me, of this
Everything you said
session,
was already advice. Yes.
yeah, it's already advice. You know what
Yeah.
I'm giving you a pinpoint in terms of what to look for.
Mhm.
Basically, if you get to go into an agency with a multinational brand, learn about the brand, because I learned the hard way.
Right.
Okay, I graduated of the college. I worked hard enough to be able to to go, because those days, my days when I first started, I don't think you're born yet. Even your parents are not dating yet, I think. So I had to discover on my own, because
Mhm.
advertising was entirely new. I don't even know. When I watch TV, I don't even know that there was somebody else is doing that. I thought it was like Colgate were doing it. No, it was an agency who does that, because they're specialized, basically. So I find that very interesting and start learning towards that perspective. Okay, so those days are past, because now you are learning specifically in terms of the fundamentals and the science of advertising.
Mhm.
Okay, when you go into practical training, try to look for the realities of it applied to the science. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because that theory versus practical is different.
Different.
Okay?
Right.
The old thing like the IDA concept, first you attract, then interact. It doesn't work that way. It work like dada or whatever. You can turn all around. Because
Mhm.
the communication, the way you communicate, the way consumer consume the information, and the way they get the information is very, it has changed. The landscape has changed entirely,
Right.
basically. So advertising is just part of a brand communication. It's a small thing. Take two steps back and learn about the brand, basically. It took me more than 20 years to be able to understand this perspective.
Understand
I'm saying. So I was
that. Mhm.
lucky or unlucky, but yours, you have to step into it right away, because competition is tough. If you
Right.
get the opportunity to work with any agency for that matter, look for that. You know, look for that perspective in terms of where does the brand come from? How do they communicate, basically? When they communicate, what do they say? Because there's a lot of things that guideline, what do we need to say, what we can say, basically.
Mhm.
Basically, this is not our values, for example. This is not the brand values. The brand shouldn't say it this way. The brand should say it that way. Because brand is not about the design alone. It's about the behavior as well, basically. You see, when you walk into Starbucks, hi, good morning. Walk into McDonald's, good morning, McDonald's. And,
Mm.
those are the culture they're trying to create, even though they're fake, but at least they try.
Right.
So is that. So those are the perspective that the brand touch points is every angle of what the consumer, within the consumer's perspective, because we are very critical as a consumer.
Right.
Information wise, through WhatsApp or whatever, Twitter, oh, wow. So how do you filter that? That is what the brand is competing with now. They're not only competing with the competition, but they're competing in terms of tons of information that comes into play. Okay?
Right.
Another advice is like when you talk about advertising or a brand, whatever, when you talk about competition, okay, don't think I give you an example. Okay, Levi's. This is yeah, it's an old example, but it is very relevant because when
So
you talk
relevant.
about a competition of Levi's, and if I ask you a question, who is the competition of Levi's jeans? The natural answer will come out like Calvin Klein jeans,
Calvin Klein, Gap,
Hawaii jeans,
Guess, yeah.
Gap, Guess, yeah. Well, 25 years ago, Levi's has think beyond that. Okay? Okay, how much is a pair of jeans? Let's say I give an example. A pair of jeans is 100 ringgit. If you have 100 ringgit in your pocket, you go to the shopping complex or whatever, for you, let's say you go to somewhere, pyramid or whatever, you know how many thousands of shops are there?
A
How
lot,
many
yeah.
hundreds of shops appeal
100.
to you? How many thousands of products appeal to you? For a youngsters like you with 100 ringgit, what can you buy? That is the competition of Levi's. You understand what I'm saying now? That
I do.
perspective. So but not to be too generalized, in terms of a youngster, an 18-year-old in 1995, okay, those days, what are cool? Because MTV was cool, music was cool. So if I have 100 ringgit, I can buy a pair of Nike, I can buy a pair of Levi's, I can buy a Walkman. Last time Walkman was cassette,
Yeah.
a CD. I can buy a Walkman. That is a competition. So understand the bigger perspective of not only the apparel industry, the list that you gave earlier, which is
Right.
apparel industry, fashion industry,
Mm-hmm.
but it is also the perspective of the lifestyle of your consumer. That is the success of a brand like Levi's because they look beyond that. Saying that.
Yeah, I
So that
understand.
is, to me, that is wow, there's an opener. Because once you give that, and then our mind opens up. If not, we say, during my days, there were only Lee jeans and Lois and whatever jeans. Levi said, don't compete with those guys. We were selling at 150 ringgit per pair, and those guys are selling at 70 ringgit. We're not talking to the guys who can afford 70 ringgit. They cannot afford our jeans. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
They
I
cannot
do.
afford our jeans. So don't talk to these people.
You're
Our
creating a
image,
lifestyle as well as a
a
brand.
lifestyle.
Yeah,
Our
you're
image is
creating a
higher.
lifestyle.
Our image is higher. Our teenagers are cooler, for example. We claim that way without
Yeah,
having to say cool. When you claim that we are cool, you're the uncool brand in the world.
you become uncool.
Basically that. Yeah. So it is basically that. So that's a very interesting perspective I would like to share. Even that is 25 years ago, it is still because a lot of people always think competition is within the perspective of the industry. Even when you sell a car, with that money you can buy a house.
Right.
saying with that money you can renovate a house, you can refurbish a house, you can buy flat screen TVs, you can buy. That's the perspective of the
Right.
consumer. But first thing, understand the consumer. With that kind of money, what is the kind of lifestyle do they have that makes them accessible to anything that they like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, and everything you said was immensely helpful, but that's all the questions from me. Now, Cynthia will take over
Okay.
and ask you any questions from the audience from the chat box. So, Cynthia, you want to take over?
Yes, Mr. Shukri, talking about the Levi's jeans, right? We have a question for that.
Yep.
So from Miss Nozihan, she's asked about how about Levi's engagement with their audience today? Is it still relevant to the digital use?
Uh,
Mm.
Interesting question. I haven't been in touch with my Levi's clients just yet because most of them retired already. Okay.
Oh,
So, yeah.
but
Okay.
roughly, how do you see it, like, in your perspective, how their engagement with the audience? Is it very okay or is it very not so okay?
Now engagement is very much everybody is struggling to be personalized. I'm talking in a general perspective because I'm in no position to be able to specifically pinpoint Levi's because I'm not sure in terms of what they're doing now because everybody has run away from conventional advertising. A lot of clients has gone into social media.
Mm.
Okay, and I've been in touch with a lot of my industry people, my ex-staff who are into digital media. I mean, understanding that perspective, we're still struggling.
Oh.
This is my own perspective. Okay, you ask digital agency, they say no, they got it under control. But some they do. Some it's very difficult because you it's a one-to-one communication. When you
Mm.
start questioning, or whether in Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, and then people start questioning specifically. So you have to answer a specific question to a specific person with millions of people are watching. That's the danger, because the last time we talked to you, you just listen. You like us, you buy. You don't buy, basically. So
Mm.
that comes in terms of the error of the analytics. You understand in terms of what you say, and then so this is very much more specific in terms of taking the brand positioning in terms of what to say and how to say it. It has to be somebody specialized to be able to answer social media. It's not the brand
Mm.
anymore. It's not the brand people anymore. Or the brand people have to hire people. There are people who's hiring people to be able to do that. Local brand like to use what do you call it, influencer. You know, but that's it. Anything happen to influencer, they kill the brand together with the influencer because if they're involved in anything. Yeah. But back to the question in terms of how, I'm not sure specifically, but everybody is engaging a digital agency to be able to manage the brand communication because you have to have a professional to be able to manage that, basically. So that is a very sensitive area in terms of how the brand should communicate with the consumers, because anything, a wrong word you say, you see in terms of how they provide feedback, and and conventional advertising doesn't work as effective anymore,
Mm.
except for to me, this is my perspective, except for outdoor. you know
Outdoor.
Even
Yeah.
a digital Grab also still advertise on outdoor because you need people to download the app. How do you get people to download your app? You have to go back to the conventional advertising with mass communication advertising. They spend millions of dollars with a BBL or something Grab. People download Grab and start ordering food or ordering transport or whatever they can do. So especially because Levi's during our days is just communicating trends.
Mm.
So now it's very difficult to communicate trends because all of you can just whatever find any what trend that you look for. You Google, then there's millions of trends, but which is the right one? So a brand will have to find an area of what they stand for, basically.
Mm. Speaking of trends, right? When you
Yep.
need to cater the comment to specific person who doesn't like the brand,
Yeah.
one of the question is how have you dealt with the conflicts when it comes to communicating with clients, especially with the COVID situation? Because you need to customize for each client, right? So you need to be understandable and also tolerable to their needs and conditions. So how do you deal with that?
Uh, I mean, understand with the client in terms of what? Sorry.
With the clients in terms of communication, like how do you
Uh,
deal with them, each and every one of them? Because surely they have different conditions according to their needs and conditions, right? So, but
yeah.
because we are having this COVID situation, so
Yeah.
do you deal with them differently? Because most likely they would have different sets of needs.
Yeah. I bet. Okay. Number one, every client, when they want to communicate, they have to have a purpose why they want to communicate. Okay, certain brands is just that I need to sustain my exposure. Those are easy. Those are easy. I mean, you maintain whatever that you do and everything. Some are trying to resolve certain issues, certain problems. Some wanted to do certain promotion. So it has to be based on a case by case, basically. COVID doesn't stop communication as far as interactive and whatever. It's the lifestyle has changed. COVID makes us different in terms of how we move around. Our lifestyle has changed because they cannot come to the shops anymore, basically. But the communication with the brand shouldn't be much affected in terms of what we want to deliver message-wise. It may affect in terms of how the consumer wants to get to the brand. When you talk to the brand, suddenly you say, for example, pop is something that say, offer something like that, you can just run straight away. You can get to somebody pyramid. Nowadays, this time do I need to go? Do kind of thing. That interaction is not with the brand directly. Even when you want to buy stuff already, you want to go fashion, do I go to, change it, whatever the test, do you want to test or not, basically, Did somebody else has worn this shirt before or not, where I'm putting it on, that kind of thing. So that's a scary part, So that part of interaction at the store has changed. But communication shouldn't change, because the crux of the communication is based on the purpose of what you want to deliver, basically. That one,
considering the situation, right? I mean, what other strategies that they could do if they do not change their communication or whatsoever? Like, other than being empathetic, like, we know what is going on, but what other strategies that the brands can hop onto for this situation?
It's okay. This situation is global. Everybody knows that. Okay. Everywhere in the world is facing the same thing. Okay. So we can learn from each other, from other side of the world, but cannot, because I don't think we learn from Americans. They are behaving entirely different than us. Maybe that's a time we shouldn't follow them, because the conspiracy theory, don't wear masks, that kind of thing, it's very different. So those are kind of trends, the kind of thing. Sometimes we follow, sometimes we don't. Basically, to be to apply a different strategy. I think this is the point that a lot of brands are now struggling trying to analyze. And now everybody is working from home. We cannot have brainstorm anymore, basically. Normally we can have a brainstorm to be able to discuss what is the situation. We can't do research, so we don't understand, basically. So to me, the only similarity which I've gone through the different decades is the recession era. During recession, brands stop spending. Okay, there's no communication. Okay, the one thing that the Coca-Cola did in the 1997 recession was that there was a global recession. During the recession, communication goes down. So, and then suddenly Coca-Cola decide to, let's not cut our budget. We start communicating, because recession only lasted like 4 or 5 months. So during the recession, the soft drinks in Malaysia dropped by 19%, and 17 or 19%, I couldn't remember quite specifically. That means dropped by 19%. So when Coke continued to advertise, we came out with something campaign, we call it Choke, Coca-Cola Segar Semula. Choke, you take a break and then suddenly you drink Coke, you become, because probably you all were just born those days to be able to remember anything. Maybe your parents can remember. It was successful in sustaining the level of familiarity, the level of the brand presence in the consumer's mind. Everybody else dropped by 17%. Sales, okay, I'm talking about sales. Coke did not drop. Zero. When they did not drop the recession, that means they gained 17%, which everybody else has lost. I say not. So when they got out of the recession, it's very easy for Coke to continue. So they don't have to spend as much because the familiarity is already been there through the tough days. And other brands has to restart everything again because they stopped. You see that?
Do they use a lot of digitalized marketing by that time?
By that time, no, not much.
Then
by that time, that much, yeah.
Then if they do not use, right?
Yeah.
If they do not use digital, that means they use mostly on OOH lah, like out of home advertising.
No, I mean, it's above the line, not so many.
Yeah, because considering our situation now,
exactly.
we cannot use the OOH anymore.
Yeah, you don't use OOH, but the thing is, okay, because the situation is different. People use digitalization is to be able to get feedback and to get immediate feedback. Immediate feedback in terms of directing them to sales. Now that strategy cannot be done anymore because it's not that easy anymore. They direct you to sales directly. So use that as a strategy in terms of keeping presence of what you stand for example. I don't know, basically that, those and that. One of my clients I know, which is a local client, is adopting into the strategy. They're taking into, because they are evolving, they're taking this opportunity to be able to relax, let's tighten up what we stand for, and then let's introduce something new, so that at this stage, when things are quiet because people cannot come to the store, so those things. So this is the time that I mean, if you need to do reflection, because people have changed. So if you change, it doesn't matter. But don't change what you stand for, basically.
But in terms of something new, right? Do you know, like, how do we further innovate the OOH? Because right now, all hands are on digitalized kind of advertising and branding.
No, innovate OOH, I mean, you don't look at the technology is there, okay? Look at the perspective of you as a consumer. How do you want to see it? How does the consumer want to see it, basically? The last time OOH was just like static. Now it's a OOH keep on changing. But they put like 10 ads. That's all, maximum. And then that 10 ads repeat like 200 times a day, basically. If you're stuck in the traffic jam or you're stuck in traffic light, you can see about 3-4 ads, basically. 10 ads will come out in like maybe 1 minute, for example.
So there's no way to innovate it lah, like for the OOH kind of.
What I'm trying to say is that it's not so much there's no way, because they will have to find a way to be able to get to you, because so far through the years there is innovation already. Because the last time billboard were not like TV. Now they like TV. You sit at traffic light and then suddenly they keep changing, messages keep changing, basically. But OOH, remember, the purpose of OOH in those days, the fundamentals of them is just as a reminder. It's not a selling tool. That's why the OOH, you see, going to KLIA, there's only brand Sony. Just a reminder, basically. If you have the money, you spend. If you don't have the money, doesn't have to. But now, because of the digital billboard, which is like TV, so the communication is different. But again, you remember, people are on the move. So how do you deliver like 15-second message? When you drive fast, it's only 4 seconds to be able to anything. You take your eyes away for 15 seconds, you start knocking somebody in front of you, basically. So is that there are ways, I mean, to innovate in terms of how they communicate, the smaller digital boards at the shopping complexes, there's a lot. There's a lot of how you use them is important rather than the technology that come. So, I mean, sometimes if you think, I think, why can't they do this? Why can't they do that? Get the engineers to be able to design, to be able to do that. It works that way as well. It's not waiting for them to come and something new, and then it's not for them to be able to decide. It's the brand people to decide. This is how I want to communicate with my consumer. Can you make that happen? Same thing.
All right, last question is the finale ready. One of the questions also asks about the advertising trends that you see in the future, because we have all this integrated marketing communication, of course, apart from being digital. So what can you foresee for the trends like in the future after this situation going on?
It's very difficult to say.
Because you can't predict, right?
Yeah, I can't predict, because those things, okay. Number one, COVID changed everything, okay. When we recover, people were hoping that things will come back to normal. But not the normal won't be that the old normal anymore. It will be a new normal, a new normal. But the kind of communication, basically at the end of the day, industry, we're talking about advertising industry, the brand industry, the key thing is the communication. How do you communicate with the consumer? You see? So that has to be tied in with the kind of technology that's coming in the future. I don't know what's coming in the future, because there's a lot of ways of coming in the future. If you, I listen to this famous futurist, the Japanese American guy Michio Kaku was saying in terms of things are going to digitalize. Next time, if I go, I have a poster, I can just take a poster and then ask a poster will take a photograph of myself, and then will diagnose I have not enough sugar or more sugar, whatever, and then contact my doctor, just through that, those kind of things. It's the era of communication will change. How we communicate to the consumers will change. How the consumer communicate in their everyday life also. The thing is, you understand how the consumer works every day, then you adapt to that. Not trying to be ahead of that, basically. Because every day the last time we lived without this. I go to the office, I have to run down, after my client meeting, I have to run down by the roadside and put coins and telephone back to the office. Hey, client wants these changes. It takes us 2 weeks to change. Now, client want to change now. Give me in 2 minutes, for example. You know what I'm saying? Those are the kind of changes that happen. The thing is, like, we have to adapt. Because I came from an old era of everything is conventional. Now it's a digital era, basically. It's not that I'm an expert of digital or whatever, but something that I have to understand, I have to adapt, because this is what the consumers are living with every day,
We would like to thank you very much for your insightful opinion. I believe that we learn a lot. Anybody got any other questions, just bring it in, because that was the last question. I believe he has a lot of experience to share. Don't be shy. Okay.
Hi, actually, not a question. Hi, Mr. Shukri. I don't know if you remember me. I'm Nurzihan, one of the lecturers.
Yeah, the last
That
talk, is
invited
it?
you for a talk last year. Yeah, thank you
Okay.
so much for coming back in again.
You're welcome.
I think our students have and really enjoyed this session. These are, I think, a different batch from the last year's one.
Okay.
It's always a joy to hear your experiences in the business. It's something that we all can learn from. Thank you so much once again. Not really a question, but just wanted to say hi.
It's a pleasure. Hi. Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be able to share with this generation, because the thing, like I said, don't look at it as I'm an old man telling old stories, but fundamentals
Absolutely
are
not. Absolutely not.
It won't happen.
fundamentals are important. That hasn't changed, okay, for hundreds of years, the fundamentals. But
Most
the
of
way
the
you,
questions
yeah,
are from her, Miss Nurzihan, and also Miss Nicole, from the chat box. They were like spamming questions.
okay,
Yes, always,
yeah,
always interesting and engaging.
yeah,
Thank you so much, sir. We hope to see you soon in the future.
yeah. Please,
Thank you,
thank you.
Miss Nurzihan. for the questions also and for you appearing on the screen. Speaking of appearing on the screen, hi guys, can you turn on your webcams so Mr. Shukri can see your face while we also screenshot a group photo? Okay, everybody, I'll give you like 20 seconds to open your webcam. If you do not have any makeup on, it's okay. You still look pretty and handsome. Going once, going twice. Oh, I see some
Hello.
faces.
Hi, thank you for joining in.
Thank you for opening the webcams. Okay, right now we'll take a group photo. Anybody want to jump in? All right. Okay. Everybody smile. Cheese. Okay, we good. Okay, you may now turn off your webcams and go back into your sleeping suits. For now, I'll share the QR code for the feedback Google Sheet. So if you have any comments or you have something you would like to share with Mr. Shukri, feel free to scan the QR code right over here. And also I'll share the link in the box for the here. Lavira, can you share the link in the box for the chat box?
Yeah. Okay. I'm using a different laptop. I don't have the link here.
Okay, Cynthia will share the link. No problem.
Okay, sorry.
One minute. It's like loading. So, Mr. Shukri, did you enjoy the session so far?
Yeah, very nice. I mean, yeah, it's a very interesting question. I mean, it's very relevant, especially on the digitalization part. I'm sorry, I cannot give too much input on that because it's very difficult to predict. So,
No, but thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm sure everyone has learned a lot and gained a lot of insight on the industry.
I believe everyone would have been scratching their heads, thinking of what industry they should going in.
Yeah, the only thing, my answers was so much of like, because you are going into this world, right? So when I interview people, what do I look for? I don't look for your results. I know you've learned, okay? So I look for attitude, whether you understand the kind of perspective. So as you want to advise in terms of how to go into practical training, that's what you need to look for, to expand your horizon, knowledge, basically. Knowledge of how to you look at the brands, basically how I was exposed to when I first started, in terms of how to look at the competition, how to look at the kind of training that I've had the opportunity to attend anywhere all over. Sent by this brand. Or this brand that I work with.
Because we would like to express our gratitude, so we actually have a little bit of surprise for you. Right now, I'm trying to open that surprise up. Itu a bit laggy. Okay. Here we go. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. Thank you, Mr. Shukri. Laviva, can you help me end it?
Yes. Thank you,
My-
Mr. Shukri, for
Thank
coming
you.
here. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Izzuddin, for
you.
organizing this event. We'll end here today. I feel like everyone has another webinar to just jump to. So thank you
All the
so
best,
much for
everyone.
being with
Bye.
us.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You guys may leave.
Yeah, what that noise?
I'm so sorry because I pick up.
It's okay. That was a very cute video though.
Not because if I don't take off my headphones, right?
Huh?
Oh, wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, because if I don't take off my headphones, they can't hear the background music.
Oh, okay. But it was a very cute video. I think he enjoyed it. You see how he laughed.
Yeah, I'm like full screen.
He was smiling and laughing.
Yeah.
So, do you guys think it went well?
I think it went
Oh,
okay. I tried to get like a lot of people in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I shared it too. No one joined. It's too early for anyone to join.
Yeah. I had to like ask for favors. And, oh. It was like
Everyone left already. Even Miss.
I thought Mr. Izzuddin is
Yeah.
gonna.
yeah.
I thought he wants to talk to us. I don't know, like at the end of the webinar or something.
Well, mm,
The
it's still recording.
recording. Oh yeah, what happens if I like everybody leave? Does it stops?
Yeah, it stops. I think you could stop it right now.
Okay. Do you guys want to go for another webinar? I can stay until this everyone just take their leave.
I think we have to go to the other
Yeah,
webinar.
the other one.
Yeah. Oh my god, yay, we're done.
I don't feel
Good
relaxed.
job, guys.
Good job.
Oh my god, I have something.
It was okay. I think
Yeah.
it was okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
the webinar. I think we were fine.
We did our best and okay lah, not
did.
bad lah. We got 30 participants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many did he want? 50? We don't know that many people.
Yeah. We kind of like a bit unlucky because Mr. Philip couldn't like bring in his class at like consultations. But to have 30, I think it's fine lah.
I think it's good. I think we'll be okay.
Mm.
Cynthia, we can't hear you.
Oh, okay.
Should we just go to the next one now, or?
Yeah. I'm like how my guests are still here.
I think she's hanging up. I think she's saying bye. Okay, do we leave? Okay.
Bye.
Bye.